think that's reasonable. Why not, right? Someone said something about football. I don't understand. What did you say about football?
There's a football game on tonight.
Are you sure about that?
I'm pretty sure.
I'll decide. I'll decide after I see what the score is.
If you make any cheers in the middle of the meeting, we'll know what it's.
It won't. No.
How you doing, Ray? Use the microphones.
I don't think I'll be cheering.
We all have our job.
I'm glad you need technology because I just do not understand that stuff. Evening.
Let's make sure that.
All right.
Happy New Year's too.
It is a new year. Which means all the buildings and grounds problems have been solved. All of them. That's what it means.
I'm not needed anymore. Why? Sitting home.
Well, I didn't say that.
I was hoping.
So I have a buffer.
Let me
still got a
rephrase
minute.
that. We have a few things
No.
we're still working on.
Hurt the man.
She won't be here Wednesday either.
As far as I know, yeah. I just know she wasn't gonna be here.
Where you at, Nate? There you are. Jeez. I got a minute yet. 6:30. What's the matter? Does it work? Huh?
6:30.
All right, it's 6:30 and I'll call this Building Grounds and Equipment Committee meeting to order. We did not have a need for an executive session. So Mr. Mummer, would you call roll?
Mrs. Berger,
Here.
Mrs. Boyer,
Here.
Mr. Klosby,
Here.
Mr. Galzella,
Here.
Mr. Bummert,
Here.
Mr. Plessick, Mrs. Rinker, Mrs. Weaver,
Here.
Mrs. Yingst.
Here.
7 present, 2 absent.
Thank you. We did not hear in advance from anyone who wanted to who had a desire to address the board, and we have no one in front of us at this point, so we may revisit that. All right, Nate, kick things off.
So we'll start out with the high school renovation updates. Architects are working hard, engineers are working hard. Some site verifications and surveys are still going on. Over the Christmas break, we had just about every design team member through that building coming back and re-verifying and double checking and playing some of the what ifs. One of the things that we did do was an underground survey of our existing sanitary sewer lines. We brought cameras and scopes in and tracing lines just to make sure that what's under the ground is fit and good to be reused. We did disclose about 3 areas, I believe, off the top of my head, that are problematic, that through the bid documents, we will address and make sure that they're corrected and repaired, that they do not continue to cause us issues. 2 of the areas we knew about that they were problematic from time to time. We'd have to go through and clear plugs and standing water and issues in the lines themselves. So they weren't necessarily a surprise, but we just wanted to verify what we had and see what it is, so we make sure we rectify it. The architects and the engineers, I think they've heard loud and clear. We continue to reiterate to them that it is expected that we bring this thing together and go out to bid end of February, 1st of March. We had that pretty personal conversation with Mr. Brian Haynes, and everything I'm seeing from that group is they are working sincerely hard at that endeavor, and do intend to meet that. So it's a lot to do. I'm on the phone daily with those guys, and every day they're giving me questions, and can you check this and you can verify that, and I'm running back and forth, but I feel at this point, we're all working together well to bring that together and make these bid documents, come together and be a good, complete document. Last month, we met with Penn Township Public Works. Last week, I was in front of the Planning Commission, and tomorrow night, I'm in front of the Zoning Board, all part of the permitting process for this high school project. The current ground is not zoned for a school. There's no official zoning in Penn Township for a school, so we have to request a waiver to get that done. So that's part of the process. At this point, I've encountered no real opposition, just mostly kind of inquisitive questions as to what we're doing and, what's our goal and what are we hoping to achieve out of this. But no stompers and no opposition, so that's a good note. The list of alternates I placed on the agenda tonight for the board to look at, review. I wanted to talk about a little bit. Our last meeting, we discussed that in order to give the board latitude, as we kind of look towards what the end bid result's going to be and, how we can kind of help control some of those end budget numbers. We discussed having some good, solid alternates to consider for the board that would be bid with the bid package. In front of you is kind of my list that we're working on at this point. I don't really intend this to be an all-inclusive, this is a done and final list, but I thought it was appropriate for the board at this point for us to look at this, discuss it, kind of have an idea of the dollar amounts that are potentially in play, and see where the conversation goes from there. So just to kind of jump into that, the lockers, base bid, our intentions are a lot of this stuff we plan to include as base bid, that it be included in the project, because we've really drilled in hard with the architects and the designers to cut out any frills, because we started out this project knowing that the construction world and the bidding process is pretty crazy at the moment. And we really don't have many things in this project that are up for debate whether it needs to be done or not. It's just what's our priority levels is the way I look at it. The lockers, we've got a mismatch of lockers at the building. A bulk of the lockers are only 9 inches wide, which anybody that tries to put a book bag or an overcoat or anything in that realizes that 9 inches pretty tough. We'd really like to upgrade the lockers. We got 3 different versions of locks on those lockers. Some of them are to the point you can't even see the numbers on them anymore. So I'm not quite sure how the kids manipulate them, but they do. But we're putting it in as a deduct option to leave those lockers in place, refurbish what we have. The architects are pegging that at about a $500,000 credit if we choose to go that direction. Now, that's their estimate. We have to see what the contractors assign to it, but that's a consideration. Number 2 is the cafeteria roof. From the get-go, Crabtree Rurball thought it very important for an architectural statement for the improvement of the feel of the building. When you enter the building, you enter in a big open foyer, which leads into a big high cafeteria ceiling. It was always their goal to raise the cafeteria ceiling. I'm like, that sounds like a pretty big luxury to me. At the end of the day, the kids are going to eat lunch and they're going to walk away and their bellies are going to be filled and they're going to go back to math class. It's probably going to be okay whether it was a 10-foot ceiling or a 14-foot ceiling. So that I requested that to be an alternate bid. They're pegging that at about $350,000. In the halls, most of the hallway walls are covered with lockers, of course. What's not has tile wainscoting. Every district school building has tile wainscoting because it holds up well. It looks good for the long run, relatively easy to clean. It's abuse resistant. Gives it a nice finished product in the hallways. What's exposed in the high school at this point is an old tile style from the 60s. It's not a standard size that's made anymore. So we will have areas we would have to patch as a minimum. It's not going to match different style tiles. We ran into the same issue here in this building. So our base bid, the best way to do it is to cover the tile that we have there with new tile. Like I said, a bulk of the hallways are already metal locker cabinets, so it's not quite as big as it sounds when you look at the number of linear feet of hallways, but it is still a sizable price tag to it. The alternate deduct would be to leave that existing tile there, patch in between where we have to patch, and then paint it all the same color, the same as what we did in this building. We did it here. It's not the end of the world. In my mind, it's less than desirable. We're finding that after, each and every summer, we're going through and having to repaint walls because a painted tile wall doesn't hold up and resist dirt and smudges the same as a nice new fresh tile would, or even an old tile for that matter. So that's an alternate. They're pegging that at about $500,000. Gym bleachers with reorienting the gym, creating kind of an auxiliary gym in Gym 3. Gym 1 and 2 become turned to create more of that kind of arena feel. That will require new locker or new pull-out bleachers. But that Gym 3, where the great big existing bleacher is on the far end of the gym, could potentially stay in the architect's mind. They're proposing that we treat that as an alternate deduct. What happens if we don't replace that bleacher? They're thinking that's a $300,000 price tag. Nate's mindset, that's still high on our priority list. We spend thousands of dollars every year going through and doing maintenance, replacing wheels, replacing bearing points. They're old, they get run in and out multiple times. Due to the size of them and being yellow pine, they're extremely heavy. So there's a lot of friction. There's a lot of moving parts when you look at an apparatus that big. And then when they jam up, it's a problem because now all of a sudden you can't get gym class in there. You're having problems getting set up for a basketball game or whatever. So while it is feasible we could leave those in, I sure would hate to see us have to go that route. But push comes to shove, it's something on the table.
Neat. Those bleachers, are they manual move or are they mechanized?
No, those are mechanized. They're so
Okay.
big, I don't think you can manually pull those.
Good, yeah, good, okay.
What's the cost per year we're spending on keeping them up with the replacement?
Well, it depends. We come through, we have to do an annual inspection on them anyway, so that's probably $2,500 to go through the whole thing. So they'll go through and inspect it and lube it and check the bearing points. But we're to the point now that every year we have to replace some wheels and casters because they're cracking and breaking from age. I think the last estimate I saw from like 2 years ago, I think they had one estimate, it's like $16,000. And we said, well, we're getting close to this renovation. We don't really want to spend that much money on them. We ordered X amount of wheels. I don't remember how many it was, and just replaced the worst ones that we had to with the idea that we get through to the renovation. So that's probably, talking that through, it's probably something to keep in mind that if we do choose to take this deduct alternate of $300,000, there's probably $10,000, $15,000 of kind of stuff we've been putting Band-Aids on that will probably be forced to, okay, so now we're going to live with these bleachers. Now we can go back in and do some more substantial repairs rather than the bare minimum. The door access that I put on, what I'm talking about there is a key fob door hardware on the classroom doors. We already have card access, fob access on our exterior doors of our buildings. I thought it'd be important. I thought it'd be good for the board to see some of the new modern technology that's available in the interiors of the buildings. So they have lever sets now that you can actually install in a classroom door that instead of being operated by a key is a key fob, pretty similar to what we do on our exteriors. To me, it would be a safety enhancement. A lot of it's convenience because now our standard safety policy is doors always locked, always closed. So that's a safe condition to be in, but it makes for a pain in the butt when kids leave to go to the restroom or get called to the office or have to run out to their locker. If we have the key fob access, it makes manipulating the locked door much simpler, much easier. So that's an option I'd like for the board to at least see. It's an upgrade from where we're at now, as far as I'm concerned, but that's about $100,000 price tag is what I'm pegging it at this point. Similar to the middle school project, we're evaluating the roof, trying to figure out the best avenue to make that a sound, reliable roof. So we're having a roof survey done, an infrared and some core cuttings to actually see what's in our roof. My goal, my recommendation to the board, or my desired route for that roof would be the same as we did here on the main part of the building. Remove the old rubber roof, remove any wet or damaged insulation board, but not all the insulation board. Old standard was you tear everything off down to the bare deck and start over. My statement is, why spend all that money tearing off good insulation board, spend money at the dump to get rid of it, buy a new insulation board, put it all back. Let's leave up what's good, replace what's damaged, put an additional cover layer over the entire roof, so we have a fresh bonding surface for the new roof membrane. We end up, the end product ends up being more R value than what we currently have with a fresh membrane roof over top. One of the alternates that we're exploring would be they have poured in place, basically it's like a silicone rubber type roof. So you don't replace all your insulation. You pretty much leave intact what's there, and they flood the roof with a liquid silicone to seal it up, and it gives you a new weatherproof surface. My statement on that is I think the silicone rubber weatherproofing is a good product. What I've seen of it, I'm pretty impressed with it. But my basic statement is it's only as good as the subsurface underneath it. So it could be the best product in the world, but if we're putting it over compromised insulation, if we're putting it over old roof that's starting to fail, that concerns me. So again, we're going to ask to see what the price differences are, see where it ends up, make a decision from there. But at this point in the game, I think it's good for the board just to kind of understand some of the dynamics we have out there moving around and some of the things we're considering, some of the pros and cons either way.
With the membrane, they're not concerned about mold and the potential of locking mold underneath of there?
That evidently not. I mean, that's their go-to as they go through and they reinforce the seams that are there. They leave the rubber membrane that's there and they flood the roof. Now, once we have this infrared predictive survey done where it kind of the infrared is a way to kind of get a reading on how much moisture you may or may not have trapped. Depending on what that shows, maybe that will change some of their mindset too. I think it would definitely would change mine if we see that we've got vast areas. Why would we ever cover that up?
Along those lines, Nate, how accurate and thorough is that infrared? Will it show us all the problems to your estimation, or can it miss?
I think it's like everything else. It's going to be as good as the company you use to a large degree. I've researched, I've reached around, I've reached out to my peers, I've talked to a couple different engineers. The outfit I'm trying to get lined up and get out here is a firm in Frederick, Maryland. That's all they do is infrared roof surveys. So they come out, they'll scan the entire roof. You'll see a heat gradient different on the roof depending on if the insulation is compromised or not. And then they follow back with the new core cuts wherever they anticipate there's problems, just to actually physically verify what's going on and what they're seeing there. So I think it's a sound procedure.
With the moving of the kitchen, and the kitchen's not in the same spot, right?
Correct.
So then with all of the machinery that's going into the kitchen, all the hoods and things like that whole venting system is gonna be new. So that portion of the roof would need to be replaced regardless.
Yeah, there's vast swaths. I mean, the overall scope of the project is we're adding rooftops to that building. That building has virtually no rooftop units now. So till it's said and done, we'll probably have in the neighborhood of 26 rooftop units. I'm just guessing that physically require somebody to cut a hole in the roof, cut 2 holes, put a curb, and flash all that in. So, it's a lot of work involved with that.
So the whole idea of pouring silicone, it's basically gonna look like an epoxy top probably, when you're going to be compromising an already old roof. To me, it seems like you're just asking for problems.
Like I said, it's not my desire, not my personal desire. I think my recommendation is we get that number, see where it is. If it's $2.5 million like they're predicting, maybe there's some ways for us to mitigate some of those fears. To me, when somebody says $2.5 million option, we
Along
need to
those
talk
lines,
about it.
There's a lot of sections that aren't getting renovated too, and that's more what you're talking to, right? Is the other parts of the school that we need to resurface with that, where we're not moving ductwork. That's more of the
So they have details and procedure for doing areas where it's in essence a brand new poured in place silicone roof too. So even if it's a brand new wing on this building, it didn't have a roof prior to be covering up. They have details that I've seen and procedures for putting down new insulation board and putting down a new flood cloak. So they have techniques to do that too. It would be my desire for the roof to be kind of all the same generation and the same type rather than a mismatch, kind of like we have now. It's just one of those things that happens over years. As you put on additions, the areas of roof that are older than other areas, you end up with this kind of dissimilar roof at some spots where we'll have, one style roof and shrinking and pulling one way and another style doing something else. It sure would be nice if we get that entire building at this point in the game to be all of the same generation, same life expectancy, same movement, same parameters going on.
And the last follow-up question I had on that, so if we infrared to see where areas of problem are, and then we pull off without tearing out the insulation, how assured are you we're not going to do damage to the insulation we've already inspected when we pull off that roof? Can we remove without damaging the underlying insulation effectively?
Yeah, the insulation board itself just has like a paper facer, so if you're only pulling off the rubber roof that's on it now, that's bonded to it. So that ends up peeling some of your paper facer off. The idea of putting a whole new fresh layer of insulation board, backer board down over top of it, half of that is to make sure you get some more R value. Modern standards, everybody wants more R value. And the other factor is you get fresh facer board that when you glue your new roof membrane to it, it has a nice, fresh, new, clean substance to stick to. So it's kind of twofold. The way they make the bonding of that cover board, that added layer of insulation board, a lot of times they'll just adhere that on. They'll use an adhesive spray foam and they'll spray it and actually glue it to the old roofs. That seems to hold up quite well. It's pretty sticky stuff.
Thank you.
But at the end of the day, the roof is so big on that building that there's multiple different things for us to explore and be open to as far as, like I said, the architects are anticipating it could be as much as a $2.5 million credit to accept a silicone poured roof versus a new membrane roof. It's something for us to see and talk about. The item 7 is stuff I just kind of wanted to point out to the board. All along, as I said earlier, we knew this was going to be tough bidding environment with contractors and materials and inflationary forces we've been feeling. So we've been really putting just a discerning eye on all the decisions all the way through. And so I just kind of wanted to point out, site work, there's been a lot of pressure on the architects to minimize site work. My statement was, anything we can do within the curb lines and not tear out curbs and tear up parking lots and asphalt is a good thing because a parking space doesn't improve anybody's SAT or get them in a better college. Spending money on the building, spending on the educational process. I'm not concerned about creating new curb and parking spots. So I think we've done a good job on that. We've really condensed the amount of disturbed space on the site. The overall footprint of the building, we went back to the architect probably halfway through this process and said, look, you got to cut out some more space. What you have designed here is nice. It would be great. It would be wonderful. But you know what? At the end of the day, we think we can do with a little bit less. That's happened. I mean, we've trimmed out quite a few $1,000s, a couple $100,000s of extra space from areas that, this area doesn't need to be as big. These offices don't need to be as big. The storage area doesn't need to be as big. Auditorium, we went through that. We looked at that and evaluated the auditorium. Well, we need new sound system. We need new light system. We need new curtains and new stage equipment. The seating is in good shape. The sound acoustical shells in the ceiling are in good shape. So there's a lot of decisions there we're making to kind of maximize and conserve dollars and spend it where we need to. We need new carpet. We need new paint. Like I said, we need some of those electronic aspects, but we don't need to tear the seats out for no reason and throw them away. They're in good shape. There's something, if we get another 10 years out of them, great. And if we have to replace them in 10 years, that's not a huge deal. That's an easy in and out. It's not like you're tearing the ceiling out to put a new HVAC system in 10 years. You're just unbolting seats and bringing new seats in. So to me, that makes a lot of sense to conserve our dollar there.
So our seating capacity isn't going to change?
Technically, it does not change. Now, they might have to make some accommodations for ADA that we don't currently provide. So while it'll appear we have less seats, those are technically spots for a wheelchair-bound person to sit. So it doesn't really change your capacity that much.
We do have a couple of those now, right?
Yeah, we have some spots now,
Yeah.
but it's a lot like most things. Code changes and where they want
Ah.
ADA now, it's more than what it was.
Okay, do you, offhand, what is the seating capacity of that? Around 800?
I'm thinking 800 was what was in my head, if I have to guess.
I think that's, we say about 800.
I think we currently have the first one row taken out, so that kind of fluctuates the seating capacity a little bit.
Yeah.
But when we looked at the auditorium, it's been expanded once from what I can tell over the history of the school district. It sure would be nice to be big enough to seat our entire student body, but at 800, we're not even close. And structurally, there's no real ways to make an adaptation there to do that. So part of what we concentrated on is when we looked at that gymnasium area and the reconfigured seating there, is that we create enough seating area to fully seat our student body in there. So that's kind of our fallback. It's not the auditorium, but it still gives us an area where we can pull the entire student body together in the one location if we need to. Science casework was a new one once we got hit with that latest revision to the estimates, and I kind of went back through and was walking the halls and looking and just really thinking about what can we do. We've got 9 science classrooms that have extensive amount of oak casework in it. I went back to the architect and said, look, I said, I don't think we can tear out this oak casework and replace it with anything as good as what's here. What are we doing? Why are we taking this out? Let's leave it in. Let's make our ADA accommodations, because again, all that stuff's changed. There are some changes we have to make. But 9 classrooms of science casework is sizable chunk of change. The architect had told me what they thought it was, and I don't recall. I'm sorry, I apologize. But I'm just trying to, impress upon the board that we've really been kind of watching this tight all along. The lower gym locker rooms, we assessed all that. We're doing the minimum changes and requirements downstairs below the gym and those existing locker rooms. For all intents and purposes, they're in pretty good shape. We're kind of limiting ourselves basically to ADA accommodations and some locker changes, because the lockers we have do not really facilitate what we do in the locker rooms anymore. So we're changing those out. And the latest revision we went through, we actually went back through and looked at our fire breaks in the building. Fire doors, fire windows, movable fire walls are extremely expensive, and we actually made some adjustments to where that stuff is located and minimized. They call it a wand door. It's a couple $100,000 automatic fire partition wall that comes out. We were able to eliminate that, eliminate a couple other fire doors. So, again, I'm just trying to impress upon the board. The architects have really heard the urgency of watching our P's and Q's on this thing and making sure we come in with a tight project. Yes.
Sorry to circle back to the beginning. Number one, with the lockers, approximately, just ballpark, how many lockers do we currently have?
Student lockers, we have about 1,700, I believe.
Okay, and they're about 9 inches, you said?
A bulk of them are 9 inches wide.
The ones that we installed at the middle school, what's the approximate size of those?
Those should be 12-inch ones.
So if my numbers were a little off because I assumed we had about 2,000, so I'm a little off. But if you do the math at 2,000, the difference in linear feet that you're gaining by increasing your locker size is about 600 linear feet. If that was enough to get rid of the extra hall tile wainscot, you have a $500,000 locker, but you also have a $500,000 hall tile wainscot. In my mind, I would rather see lockers be of a size that are usable. I mean, if we talk safety, let's not have these kids taking their book bags all day, every day around the building. Lock them up. At the high school, they do. Oh, I know the middle school doesn't, but I thought the high school was allowed to because they couldn't fit them in their lockers. But if we increase the size and allowed them to have adequate space to store their things, then I think that also improves the safety aspect of things in the building. And if we could make them a size that then negated how much extra hall tile we'd have to replace, then potentially there's a savings there, if I'm understanding you correctly.
Correct, but part of right sizing and making sure we're not overspending, part of what I've also proposed to the architects is that 1,600 is an adequate number. We probably carry an extra 100. Well, at this point, high school population is like 1,380 and change.
Okay.
So when we carry over 1,700 lockers, we have quite a few empty lockers sitting there. So if we replace all these lockers, I'm not proposing we put in 1,700 to 1,800 lockers. I propose 1,600, 400 per class should be adequate for what we're
Okay.
doing. So while what you're saying with the wall tile makes a lot of sense, it doesn't save you quite as much wall tile when we drop the locker count by 150.
Okay.
There's 150 lineal feet that we're re-exposing
Right.
again.
Okay, thank you.
But to your point, Mandy, a lot of kids, because they can't carry their backpacks around in school, those big backpacks won't fit in that 9-inch locker, some of the big ones, and that's the challenge. I don't know what is the answer that how do they deal with that when,
So a lot of times they'll leave it in the homeroom, first room they report to.
right? So they're leaving it in the homeroom because they can't fit them in the lockers, basically,
And that happens a lot when sports equipment.
right? Okay.
Well, And just with the lockers itself, you mentioned like there's lockers that you can't read the codes anymore and things like that. I mean, if we're spending millions of dollars on a high school renovation, we need better lockers for our kids. So that to me is like a no-brainer.
And here's one, I didn't want to interrupt you earlier on number 3, the wainscot. So just one of the takeaways from over at York Tech is they have hallways where they have seating that's brickwork with seating up against the wall. If we were to case in seating instead of tiling, would that give us a cost savings or would that increase cost?
So paint the tile that's there and put a
If you
seat in
come
front of it?
if you come halfway up the wall and put in like a bench, like just a brick or lumber bench that's seating instead of tiling it, first, do we have the width to do that? Because that's what they do at Tech, and they're seating for the kids, that cooperative space we talked about, and it also saves you the tile work. Is the tile work or would that box in be more expensive?
What's the seat made out of?
Into the wall.
Mhm.
But is it tile then, or what is it?
No, it's like a brick support, and then it's just a wooden bench that goes from each brick column to the next brick column.
They almost look like planters. but they're not.
Right. And they're really nice places for people to sit and, yeah,
So they're just used for people to sit. There's
right
no
along,
other-
yeah,
There's no other purpose for them.
right. And so, and that's the thing, it would preclude the tile work
Costs more than having just a flat wall.
if we have the width. That's the real issue I see, right?
Yeah,
It's-
they have wide hallways out there too.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to understand the application then. So we have an existing tile wall.
Mhm.
What will we do with that? Just paint it?
So the cost that we're facing is what we're doing with the surface of the wall, correct?
Correct.
So instead of resurfacing like a wall we've taken out,
Yeah.
we're putting in, I guess you would just go straight to construction material behind it and then bench up against it instead of wainscoting or tiling.
So I think that's probably the problem is the construction that's there now.
Yeah.
You have tile that's stuck on old plaster walls that's over top of block.
Okay,
I think the process of removing that tile,
that's the cost.
what's left will be unsightly. It'll be rough. I mean, from what we saw here in this building, that when we had spots where we had to chip off tile,
Right.
it stuck for real.
But if
When
you
you did
box
it at
over
home-
that with benching, then you wouldn't see the unsightly removal.
But your bench is only 16
Yes,
inches high, right?
so we'd only save a quarter of the wall, agreed. But that's a quarter of the wall for the entire length of the hallway.
Is there a concern about the maintenance of something like that? Because I know the tile, it's a maintenance issue. That's why it's used.
Tile makes it nice and clean
So-
and easy. I guess I'd have to probably try to stop in
Understand it.
there and look at their
Okay.
benches that they have. I can't
It's just
quite
a thought,
picture it.
you know?
It's outside their calf, I think, right?
Right, yeah, it's,
I guess to me, just off the top of my head, Matt, it just seems like we're adding another
adding a
another
cost instead
thing
of
to the
deducting.
building and not
Okay.
necessarily, if we're looking at saving money, I don't hear that we're deducting that much. I'm afraid we're adding more than what we're deducting as far as what's below the bench. Because, an actual seated bench is, you're only talking 16, 18 inches.
Right. So you're not, in your mind, you're not saving anything, okay?
No, and the other thing, and not to take anything away from it, but putting these benches in, and he was talking about that just a while ago, what's the educational value of just having a row of benches
Well, you
in
did
a
say,
hallway.
could it be flexible seating? Could it be, could it
Yeah, that's what I
transform a
was gonna say.
hallway
Yeah.
into a learning area? But
Yeah, there
Different
are times when you're in the high school, kids will be working in the hall, not necessarily in a collaborative space, but they are working in the hallway. It could lend itself to a space for the kids rather than sit on the terrazzo floor.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
So Jeff shared, he says he can get me some pictures tomorrow, get some pictures of what it is, and we'll look at it and see if there's avenues to leverage that, but,
Yeah, if it's cost savings.
we'll check it out. Take a look. But just to summarize the high school part of this conversation up is it, I think through the alternates, hopefully we can gain some value options at least for the board to consider. To me, the overlying message that I hope the board takes away is we've been very conscious of cost from the get-go in this project. We didn't include things that I feel are just arbitrary and that we could just easily do without. I think anything we choose to deduct, which I understand if we have to, we have to. There is an associated con with that in general because it's not on there just because. We did our best to make sure that wasn't the case. As far as the contractors coming through with value engineering when they bid this project, I just try to impress upon the board that the contractors make money. It's a margin over top of the cost of what goes into the building. In all likelihood, they're not going to come through and be super forthcoming with all kinds of ways
right.
to lower their price. Now, they might be forthcoming ways to increase their price.
Sure.
I think there'll be some savings to be had. I think there'll be some things that'll say, hey, we've got a better way to do this. But at the end of the day, Crabtree, Ruball, and their design team have done a lot of schools. They've seen a lot of stuff. We have to trust that they've picked up some of those tricks along the way that, hey, this is a good economical way to get this done. So I'm just saying that, once the contractors get this and bid it, as far as the board goes, I don't recommend you hold out hope that there's a whole lot of money come raining in from the contractors offering on it. I think there'll be areas, but nothing of.
I appreciate that, Nate. I appreciate the work that you did to come up with this list. And I want to ask, before we do move away from it, if this list and this conversation has sparked any thoughts among the board. I mean, just something that now you're wondering about, and what if we didn't do this? What if we did this? Feel free, to ask about that or share, or if you think of it later. Go ahead.
For me, what it has sparked is there's options. There's options for us to consider. We're all very much interested in trying to keep the cost down as much as we can. But in many cases, almost everything that I'm looking at, like Nick says, comes with a substantial cost. And the last thing in the world that we want to do at this time is put a Band-Aid on something that we're going to have substantial problems later on. The locker situation has been a problem forever. The roof situation is a no-brainer that I think everybody, without even reading people's expressions, we're all on the same page that we've got to do what's right for the roof, considering some of the other roofing issues that we've had in the past. We don't want to open that can of worms again, and we don't want to just do a stopgap on one area and then have problems with other areas later down the line. Anything when it comes to fire doors or access to doors are a safety issue for me, and I want to make sure that if there are changes made to those are changes that have to be made. They're not changes that are chosen to be made. The gym bleacher situation, anybody that's been here for any considerable period of time knows that those bleachers in many respects are like the visiting bleachers on the football field. They've been a problem for a long time. And if we just keep stop-gapping, we're going to end up with more issues down the line. Those are just a few random thoughts that I have. And I appreciate Nate giving us the options, giving us a real broad perspective on the cost of things, but so much of this, in my opinion, is going to open up more of a can of worms than it is going to be beneficial to the taxpayers as well as the students and their education.
Mrs. Berger, if I may, the thing that I want to applaud Nate and the team for is they've really taken a building that's old. By every stretch, that building's old. from the original to the addition. Even the addition's 30 years old. And they're transforming it into a modern type of instructional component that doesn't really exist right now. Collaborative spaces, hallways and lockers and all the things that used to be, weren't there, weren't considered when you were in your classroom rows, were like when I went to school. And that's about the last time that thing was renovated. That being said, I do feel like the value engineering that he's done has allowed us to take a building that's very old, but will survive another 30 years before it needs to be touched again. And I think that's the thing we have to remember. None of us in this table are, spend money like it's coming out of a faucet, not by any stretch. I mean, I've seen Nate work with the architects, and this board has considered every penny that has been talked about. But at the same time, Mr. Clausby, to your point, can't sacrifice 30 years so that it lives up to that before it has to be done again by pinching a penny here where we should or we shouldn't. And I think Nate has demonstrated that every option is being considered to be mindful of those dollars, but at the same time, not at the sacrifice of the program.
Yeah, I just have one question going back to the door access key fob in the classrooms. How, if somebody needs to leave the room, do they issue a key fob for them to come back in, or how does that work?
So only, I look to the principals to work out daily operations of the building. My suggestion to them would be, you have the key fob operated lever set. It will always leave somebody out no matter what. You can't lock somebody in a room. You'll always let them out into the hall. The doors close when they leave, but they're issued a bathroom pass, basically. That is that key fob for
Okay.
that room and that room only. So when I leave, I can go to the restroom and I can come back, and the only door my key fob will let me in is the room I left.
The door you came
And
in.
that bathroom pass key fob has to stay with that intended room.
That classroom.
Because we don't want to open up the scenario where I say I'm going to the bathroom, get a key fob, and then go down the hall and start sneaking into other rooms or going in, starting trouble where I shouldn't be. I think to me, that's a reasonable way to handle that.
Okay,
aspect.
yeah, that sounds,
And then
logical.
the big bonus to the program of the classroom, the classroom daily activities is when I come back to the classroom, I'm not knocking on the door like they are now, and the teacher's having to stop and walk over and say, hey, go let him in. It should really help decrease the interruption in the classroom space.
The other part is if one happens to go missing, shut it off immediately. So it's not like there's a security, somebody could walk around with that badge at night and get back in that room later. If the teacher notices it's gone, they contact the office, it's immediately disabled and it's no longer valid. So there's a security aspect with that as well.
Yeah, that's a real plus on the security end, because, a hard key, somebody swipes it, somebody steals it. To go around and change every lock to circumvent that key, prevent that key from being used, is a real problem, versus a system like this. You get on and make a couple key clicks, and that key fob's no longer good for anything.
So would the interior side of the classroom doors then be a crash bar?
It would just be a lever set.
It
like
could still
commercial
be a lever set?
Yeah,
Okay.
it looks similar to that.
And that's where we're at now, as we push to go out and we need to knock to come back in, correct?
Correct.
So
Now it's a lever set like that. It's just that when you leave the room, it's locked. You have to knock.
to my mind, that's one of the good savings on this. What, like you say, having a fob floating around that someone can then use that has to be turned off versus having to just knock and go open the door. The go open the door scenario seems more secure to me because you don't have an access key floating around. So I appreciate you coming up with that savings, as well as the cafeteria roof not being vaulted. That's an excellent savings. I mean, I do agree some of these are not necessarily things we want to go to, but I keep coming back to, we started off with options in the low 40 millions, and we're up to 65, and we're still going up. There's a point, and mine, for me, it's 65 million. If we need to cut something that we've added, we need to cut. My hard line is 65 million. So that's just where I sit. I think we've added to get up to the 65 million, almost 20 million from our starting point of the 40 some million. So to my mind, we're at ceiling. I appreciate you coming up with the options. I do. I mean, you're trying and you're finding spaces. But if we need to discuss, I know not everyone agrees, but
I don't know where the 40 million came from. This building costs almost $40 million.
Yeah.
So there's no way we could take
And-
that budget
I
and say
thought-
high school.
I thought we
I
started
think
this
the
one
40
around.
million was just the HVAC and the-
no.
Right,
the-
yeah.
40 million is
We
right,
started
we're
this,
talking.
we started this building at 60. The high school. We started talking, the high school would be around 60.
My
I think
rec-
we had options A, B, and C, and
Uh-huh.
kind of the bare
Yeah.
bones options just to replace the mechanical system and do no more than we ultimately had to do.
Mhm.
I think put us somewhere in that, close to that 40 million range.
Right,
But
Yeah.
then as soon as we said, well, we really ought to expand our music department, expand our
Right.
shop classes.
and
we
that's
were
what I'm
into caf-
referencing.
That put us in that $60 million range.
Right.
Correct.
And for educational value, we need to do what we need to do. We need to be able to give our students what they need.
And then just for board oversight, vision, be able to visualize it better, there is a kind of the latest set of floor plans up. They're not super clean yet, but it was just something that's kind of where we're at in the process. It's an interiors design floor plan, so it shows a lot of the furniture. To me, it gives you a little better feel of where stuff sits and how it lands and some of the overall conceptual vision for how the space is used. So that is laying on the back. So, you know, you're absolutely all free to look at it, ask questions. You know, if there's something you want to ask me about, you know, shoot it out to me, grab me, whatever. But, you know, without looking at that, I think it's probably hard for you guys to get a good feel too, where we're exactly at. And then the jump ahead, trying to wrap up this high school thing, down to the last one, our February meeting, I'm proposing we move that one to February 6th, and that's based upon, I'd like to have Crabtree Rohrball come back in front of the board. At that point, it's my anticipation that they will be at 90% construction drawings. In all intents and purposes, here is the building we're proposing to be built. They'll have elevations, they'll have artistic renderings, and it'll be a good opportunity for the board to hear directly from the architects, see where we're at with the design process and what's actually going out to bid. Now, there'll be some probably details, some fine scope things still being tweaked at that point. It always is up into the last minute and even a week or so after the, you know, the bid documents are released. But at that point in the game, for conversation, it's what we're putting out to bid. So I think that would be a good relevant time for the board to be able to hear from the architects, ask questions, see the full-blown drawings for all intents and purposes before it goes out to bid. And at that point is kind of where, if there's any further conversation on alternates to be included in the bid documents or alternates to be dropped. See, we're just not even interested in hearing that because, and we don't want to waste a contractor's time. Or, hey, we need some more alternates. I think to that point in the game, we really need to be kind of all together as a board at that point. So the architects have the last couple weeks just to tighten stuff up so that what goes out to the public realm is a good tight set of drawings.
Would that still be at 6:30?
Can be, yeah. Good with the high school for now? Middle school update, we're still dealing with train HVAC issues on the roof over Christmas holidays and the severe cold weather. It was problem trips and a lot of service issues. We had a conference call on Friday morning, working with the architects. A letter went out today to Train and to Myco, the overall prime contractor on that end of the world, stating within 5 days, we want to hear what the specific plan for resolution is to this. It's been long enough. It's been too long. We need to draw this to a close. Here's the problems. Here's what needs to be resolved. What's the official plan? So that letter went out today. No, he did not. It just went straight out.
Are we holding anything back from them?
50,000 and change.
Thank you.
some of the challenging part there is I propose virtually all of the issues with train manufacturing, train as the manufacturing supplier. They don't have retention held on them. Micro had to pay them up front and full with the equipment delivery. So the only thing that we really have to truly work on is trains' honorable reputation.
Well, do we have leverage? I mean, we're about to do another $60 million renovation.
I think, yeah, it gets difficult, yeah.
Now, when you talk about the units giving out or having trouble with the cold, I mean, units aren't infallible. And in all your years of doing this, that was extreme cold before the Christmas holiday. Were there units on any of the other buildings that struggled, or was it solely just the new units on the middle school building?
Well, try to keep my days straight, on that Friday, the only units I was getting alerts to were on this building.
Just to give them the grace that, our heat pump system at home struggled. So I can only imagine something trying to heat something
It
this
was definitely
large.
challenging times. But
But it's
I
also
have
not the
no
only
qualms in
problem.
saying the problems here were way more than they were anywhere else. The problems here were on equipment for my interpretation is new.
Right.
It's not 20-year-old equipment. It's not 10-year-old equipment.
And the equipment
It's
we bought was
stinking new.
rated to handle the temperatures that
And
we
if I
experienced.
don't need heat on a 10-degree day, I don't need heat at all.
Right.
So if you're building and selling me a heating system, I want it to run when it's 10 degrees outside.
Do we have train on other buildings?
We have a lot of training in the district.
Okay. Well, to me, that seems like that would be somewhat leverage for us to say, we have train in other locations and they're working fine. Now, there's something wrong with what you've presented to us, you've given to us. You need to take some action, like you're saying with
And
your
that's
5
what we've
days.
been repeating for probably a year and a half now. So look, we were comfortable with train. We put all of our faith in train. We need you to stand behind your product and make it run the way we expect train to run, because we have high regards for train and we expect it to perform.
And the only difference that I can think of between this arrangement of train and other facilities with train is mechanical installer, Micah. We didn't have Micah on any of our other projects.
Yeah, I don't.
I'm
The-
not
the-
saying, I'm not saying it's totally their problem, or they did something, or they didn't follow specs. But that's the only thing that's different.
The part that I like to try to hold Micah accountable for, which it's difficult and tricky as you've seen,
Oh, I know.
is that they are the prime contract for the mechanical equipment. They bought this equipment. Whatever their agreement was with Train, they bought it from Train, they installed it from Train. Even though it's not particularly an install problem, which I'm not proposing it is.
Right.
It's me as a contractor, if I brought this in and put it in your house and it's not performing, I want to stand there beside you and work with Train and make sure it's made right, instead of saying, I didn't build it. And that unfortunately is what we're struggling with. At the end of the day, we need Train to step up. It'd be nice if Michael helped us more in that endeavor, but the people to fix the equipment is Train.
Yeah.
I'm confident.
Okay, I'm with you.
Number 5, our toolcat replacement, that's just kind of a Nate full disclosure. That is in our general fund for this year. What was budgeted was about a $35,000 difference. Did that get moved? Well, you have to reference it then. General fund.
It
um,
didn't make the cut.
I'm working off my old agenda, sorry about that. Get Roar back now. The toolcat needs replacement, it's falling apart, we're having
Oh, that's
issues with it.
6B.
Is it in there?
No,
Are you
no,
adding
I'm
it in?
gonna add it in as 6B.
But, the new price updates and stuff, it's gonna be about $12,000 over budget from where we were. just from back when we bid the project originally, the replacement back December a year ago, everything that's happened, trade-in values have gone down, new prices have gone up. I just want full disclosure to the board. It's in the general fund. It's budgeted, but
What was it replacing?
it's a tool cat, so it's what our grounds crew uses. Got the little dump bed in the back and the loader bucket on the front. We get multiple tools that hooks to it. It's used hard by the district on a daily basis. It's an important tool to that grounds crew. So I was just wanting to share with the board that unfortunately that it's prices run away from us like a lot of other things.
And basically, the way we deal with that from a budgetary standpoint is we budget for lots of different types of equipment. And sometimes the bids come in more expensive than we anticipated, sometimes they come in less. Right now, you're in an environment when they're coming in oftentimes more. And we're going to talk about that when we get to the finance committee meeting as how we see estimated actuals coming in as compared to what they have in past years. Past years, we've always come in significantly under budget with expenditures because we haven't seen the increase in costs like we are with inflation right now. So what we've done in the past is as long as we've gotten it approved in the budget, we've bought them whether there's a savings or whether there's an extra expense. So it's more of an informational point at this point.
Number 7, back on the official agenda. Updates. Visitors bleachers, I did get an update on pricing from Conowaga for the porous concrete. They revised, we were originally talking $60,000 for the slab. They called me back, said they were talking with the owner of the business. They are afraid it's gonna go more like $240,000. So I'm like, once again, triple. Quadruple. So that's the madness we're dealing with at the current time in the world. So our options,
There's significant increases.
in all fairness, when we were standing out there the first time, we were standing there in the field, it was the first time the project engineer saw it. I'm standing there showing him the project. Here's what it is. Here's the dimensions. What do you think? Give me a ballpark estimate. Or are we talking about something realistic? And we kicked around and he threw out $60,000 and said, well, I think that's something we can work with. You need to go back and figure it out. Well, when he came back and figured it out, it wasn't anything that made me too happy. So what we're faced with as a district to replace those bleachers, the bleachers themselves, to tear down what was there, reinstall, is about a $300,000 price tag. Now that's last summer's price. Who knows where it's at now, but that's where it was. The options with putting it on a slab, you know, our original goal was to put it on the existing footers, which the bleacher manufacturer balked on. Wanted a continuous poured slab, which invokes stormwater management. Our biggest hurdle down there, besides stormwater management infrastructure costing you money, our biggest issue is it's a tight site. We've got power lines buried right behind the bleachers for the field lighting. Beyond that, it immediately drops into a fairly steep grade. It drops down into a drainage reservoir behind, which all your stormwater management is. You don't want your water to roll away. You have to hold it. We've got limited spots to hold it. That's why we came back to the porous concrete as being a good viable way to go because it doesn't take additional area. And we don't have a whole lot of additional area in there. But then we come back to this punishing price tag. So that's the update on the bleachers. Unless the board feels strongly that we just need to jump on the porous concrete right now and get her done because this has been hanging out there. I just feel like I need to dig back into it and see if I can come up with one more angle on this thing. I mean, I don't know what else to do for the district. It just seems like a pile of money for what we're trying to accomplish. You know, it just seemed like that porous concrete was a good viable way to go if the manufacturer is demanding a full slab. But at a $240,000 price tag just seems to be just punishing.
Nate, did they articulate why the price increased? Concrete, labor? Did they say why it went up significantly? Did they specify?
He didn't articulate. I mean, some of the things he was telling me is when he did call me back and tell me that he was including a deeper stone base. He was including a thicker concrete pour than what we were originally talked about. He was talking about some additional reinforcement in the concrete just to make sure it was structurally able to handle the bleacher sitting on it. But, you know, it was just, there's only so much you can do when you call a guy out and the first time he stands there and looks at it, you're standing there scratching on a piece of paper and typing on your phone, trying to come up with a number. You can't really hold that over his head, but we would surely hope he'd be a lot closer than what our conversation was, as it turned out.
Is Conawago the only one that does the porous concrete?
I'm not aware of anybody else that does porous in the area. Does Wagman? Byron does. Okay, I can absolutely check with them.
And would it be possible, and I haven't seen what the bleachers would look like, but would it be possible to put this porous concrete only under where the structured footers would need to be and then do like a stone fill for the water to filter down into the ground versus doing a solid piece of concrete, making sure you have the weight bearing on the porous concrete, but if I picture them correctly, the whole thing doesn't sit flat, right? It has structural pieces that sit flat
It has runners every 6 feet.
every 6 feet.
So I propose, based on what your design concept is pretty much what we have now. So we have a
Okay.
concrete footer every 6 feet.
Okay,
And that very well may be our most economical option at this point, is to go through and tear out the footers now that don't work and put new footers in at 6-foot centers so that they do match to the new structure
which then
and have
hopefully
stone
would
infill in
make the
between.
vendor
And that would,
happy.
that would minimize our stormwater management impact. And we could do that with standard concrete. We wouldn't need porous concrete if that's where this big upcharge is coming
Do
from.
we currently have stone? I'm sorry, I've never been, I apologize. I've never been on the or the other side of the
Under the bleachers.
stadium. Never been under your bleachers. Is it currently stone?
It's, a lot of it's like a blacktop milling. It's kind of a gravel. It's
Okay.
just a small aggregate.
Just.
But yeah,
That's-
that
that's
would be kind of probably one of the last other options to explore, is going back through and putting on individual footers. It would be more labor intensive. That's, till you formed all those individual footers versus just pouring a slab. Excuse me? I think we probably need something still to spread the pressure from the bleachers. With it being 6 foot on centers, it's only on a piece of 2-inch angle or something. Yeah, it would sink through our asphalt if we did asphalt.
Asphalt.
Yeah, that's what was used out here in the back courtyard area.
And that's generally more reactive to heat as well, correct? Asphalt?
Yeah, it just doesn't have, to me, my biggest concern would be the bearing capacity. You set that weight of that bleacher on it continually all the time, and, hot summer days, it's just gonna kind of just gradually creep and sink into it.
Then it really won't go anywhere.
Be stuck for good.
From my understanding, stormwater is you're replacing your existing concrete. Same space to avoid stormwater management altogether, you're replacing existing, right?
Well, if we just do the footers, we'd only be replacing existing. So yeah, that would probably be the angle that we would want to employ, that, we're not creating any additional impervious. It's the same as what it was. It's just relocated. Yeah, at the end of the day, it's best if it's kind of rolled together, so there's no pointing of fingers as to who. Mm-hmm. Yep, I agree. Yes.
And I feel like we've been talking about these visitor bleachers for since I came onto the board, and they are not going to get any cheaper. We need to get on, I think we need to get on this project, because it's just going to keep going up and up and up. And it's something we need.
Mhm.
So.
So just to close that conversation, pursue individual footers, 6-foot footers,
This is what you do
Or-
for a
or to
living,
get-
sir.
or to get it done.
Pursue whatever, pursue whatever you can to move forward and get the cost down.
I mean, I think it goes without saying that $240,000 is not going to happen.
I mean, that's an option. That's what I'm
It's a
asking. If we
terrible
want it
option.
done, that's an option. It's right there in front of us, but it's coming.
But
to
I
the-
think sometimes, and, I think if a company doesn't want to do something without having to politely say, no, thank you, maybe they bid themselves out.
They could probably precast this features for that.
Right.
I don't know what they're doing. Yeah, it's just shocking, yeah. But that might be a good point.
I mean, we talked about this when we talked about bidding out the jobs for the high school. The companies are looking for jobs and they know their margins. And if this wasn't, what they were looking for, then they were going to give you a number so that you were the one going, oh yeah, that's not going to work for us, versus them being like, no, thank you. I don't want a giant school district in Hanover, Pennsylvania's business, because then we look like we said, no, thank you. So I don't know, just a thought. And it's
So-
nothing against them. If this wasn't for them, this wasn't for
No,
them.
it's just how it is sometimes, so.
No, and that's the way it works. When we bid out this high school project, there's gonna be some contractors who are gonna say, nope, sorry. Just because. And the other ones, because of price.
Right.
The extra. Yeah. I'm not sure it'll hold.
7B, scoreboard, just an update there. We've asked the community initiative to come forth with their pledge dollars till the end of this month. Last I've heard, they're about the $15,000 mark. They were really looking to try to raise about 50, so it's a challenge for them at this point. I will touch base with them closer to the end of the month. If they indeed are that much short of the goal, I'm thinking we'll have to go back to looking at a scoreboard that's more in line with what we currently have in my mind, rather than increasing size, increasing height, moving location, and just put one in that's a lot more similar to what we have rather than different. Good with that?
Great.
We'll order them both, see which one shows up.
We need footers for the school board.
Yeah, we will, if we move it. Update on the ball field, the alternate new ball field that I would like to put in for the baseball team. A grant opportunity came up this fall. I was kind of purposely waiting to hear on that. I heard over Christmas that we were denied, did not receive that grant money. So we're on our own on moving forward with that. So with that kind of closed, we'll be back on and trying to solidify some of those quotes and what that project looks like without government funding involved.
Not to get off the ball field real quick, I was asked by a concerned citizen that's involved in some of the programs that have made donations towards the baseball program in particular, since there have been questions raised about fees as well as the grant situation, that they wanted every board member to be aware that everything that has been done on behalf of the district by the Outlaws and individuals associated with the Outlaws. So I have a copy that I'm just passing to everybody so that you are aware of that. Thank you. No, they just wanted the board to be aware of that, and then with consideration to the fee, even though I explained that that is set by policy. So Nate, I don't know whether there's anything that you need or feel the need to add in reference to that.
I guess just what I'll add to that to probably put it, I perceive in context, I wasn't aware about this until this evening, but the conversation I've been having with the baseball teams is over the last probably month, question came up as to what their roster, who the roster was as far as school district residents. The current Outlaws program, which is kind of closely affiliated with our baseball team because of the coaching, did not meet the 90% threshold. The threshold is 90% to be considered a full Class B organization. So they were in the 80s, which drops them into Category D, I believe it is, which then dictates that there are fees. Now, at the end of the day, I don't consider the fees to be punishing or extremely large, being on an outdoor grass area like that. As a district, most of our outdoor activities like that, we charge a minimal, like custodial fee, clean up, empty the trash cans. You know, we have not dumpsters, but porta pots that we have set out locations that need to be serviced. They're getting extra uses. I would propose that this letter is probably in anticipation of now being faced with fees, because in the past, there was always kind of a gentleman's agreement. They provide stuff to the baseball field. They made improvements. They donated this, they donated that in lieu of being charged those type fees in the past. The conversation I had with them based the last few weeks, based on their numbers and where they've kind of fallen to, I said, you know, we're just gonna have to start sticking closer to policy. You know, when your numbers don't meet the 90% threshold, we're gonna have to treat you as a D. It's what's fair, and you're gonna have to start paying the fees. But what about all the stuff we've donated? And my statement is, I think we're just gonna have to consider the stuff you've donated in the past as payment in lieu of those fees in the past, but going forward, that's not going to be the most prudent way to move forward. We're gonna have to fall back on the hard dollar amounts and keep it all clean and simple that way. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. You know, if any of the board has any other thoughts or comments on how to handle it, you know, the group has been very active down on the baseball field. They did use it a lot, and that parent group did positively impact and bring things into the ball field. Now, while they've used it a lot, they did their share of improvements to the field too. But while we have other groups that are wanting to have access to the field, it just seems like that's the only equitable way to handle it going forward. Is just, that's in the past, that's how we did it in the past. Going forward, we're gonna stick to the letter of the policy.
I don't have any kiddos that play baseball. Is this their only location that the Outlaws play?
As far as I know, I mean, I don't
It's not?
know.
They got fields all over here.
Oh,
Okay.
okay, okay.
And it gets very competitive when you get down to tournaments. Everyone wants to host tournaments, and that's big money makers.
And they
And
charge them
Right.
ESOB and
Right.
everything, or they gotta maintain them. This YMCA has one over, you know, that they maintain for softball. Yeah, I mean, they use them. I don't know.
For the field equipment that's listed here, for those that are mechanical, I would assume, again, limited knowledge, three-wheel John Deere field groomer, four-wheel, anything that might need any kind of maintenance done to it. Are we doing that maintenance, or have they always done their own maintenance?
The field groomer and stuff, they do their own maintenance too.
Okay,
I think probably piggybacked onto that, probably one of the kind of the more delicate or tripping points is probably stuff like the batting cage, you know, pitching stuff. So their statement to me was, so we raised the funds as the Outlaws and bought this equipment, and now you're gonna turn around and rent it to this other Hanover, the field to another Hanover league. They shouldn't be allowed to use our equipment that we bought. My philosophy is that private club bought it and donated it to the district. If it's here on the property, it's district's property, and if it's really up to the board whether an outside rec league gets to use that equipment or not.
But haven't we always, I mean, like American Legion teams, we've always had different teams playing on that field. It's not just Southwest and Outlaws. This isn't new.
I don't think there's too many other teams that've been playing there for the last 10 years.
So is American Legion not around anymore?
Legion has their own field over at McSherry's. Well, there's one in McSherry's town. There's another.
I mean, I've seen this list before today. I've been in contact probably from much the same people. I think we walk a slippery slope if we start becoming too exclusive to any one club. That's why I think we need to stick with our policy, like you're suggesting. I think we can't failed to acknowledge the contributions they've done. But at the same point, as a public institution, we can't give them exclusive use. I just don't think that's a fair way to manage things.
The baseball team, Dr. Burkhart, I would assume has a budget. Our
Our
baseball team has a budget. In the event that they are unhappy with us leveraging fees and following policy, and they were to remove the things that are not nailed, we'll say nailed down, would we be able to replace those things?
It's the baseball
Well,
team's budget, the athletic budget. I mean,
The question becomes, did the board accept these as donations?
Mhm. That's the real question, right?
So if they didn't, then they can be removed, but if they were accepted, I would assume that it's,
To my
Ours.
knowledge- To my knowledge, there's never been any acceptance. They've never said we're donating X. They've just done stuff. They would come and they would make improvements to the field. They just did it. Why? Because it benefited them.
Right, okay.
So,
So, yeah, but if you look at like landlord tenant
correct.
law, right?
Correct.
Any changes made that are permanent
Anything that's permanent on our property is ours.
is ours.
Mhm.
Anything that's not nailed down can go.
If it's
So
their track,
I'm,
yeah,
you know,
they can go.
my worst case scenario is if they're unhappy with this and they pull their items, which they would be within rights to do, can we still effectively provide what we need to for our Southwest high school and middle school baseball teams, is my question.
yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Miscellaneous objects to liquidate, it's just an FYI for the board. You see, we have some student desks, 77 chairs. We still have other excess materials. We're just cycling out the stuff that's in the worst shape. Intend to list it on municipal bid and bring back to the board for approval, highest bidder through municipal bid. So it's just an FYI for the board that, there is some more materials we're looking to get rid of. As we move closer and closer to the high school project, there'll probably be more and more of this type of stuff that we try to get ahead of and get out of the building that we have in storage that we're just gonna need to clear out of the way. So that's something to look forward to in the future to approve, hopefully some good bid numbers. And then the other, there's some sprinkler hose. District used to use a lot of 1-inch rain train sprinkler lines on the athletic fields. No longer use the 1-inch lines much anymore. We'll keep a couple around, but there's a lot of excess down there that we're gonna try to move.
They won't be needed on the new ball fields?
No, what we have up there is an 1.5-inch line. So that's kind of, as
Different-
time went along, we switched from a 1-inch irrigation system to an 1.5 and even a 2-inch irrigation system. I guess before my time, but I guess they probably found they weren't getting enough water on a field. It's pretty tough to get adequate amount of water on something the size of a football field or a baseball field. So they upped the size of those lines.
Nate, I'm unsure of not the condition, but the age of the student desks and the chairs. But in the event that we are not overly successful at getting decent bids, would the district be willing to consider potentially donating these to local programs that maybe have an even older set of what we are getting rid of? Places like maybe the YWCA that runs a preschool program for low-income families, or even our local parochial schools. I don't know. They may have nice new stuff. I've never been in their buildings, but I know we had something that really didn't get bid on much at all last time. So before something
From my
else
point of
drops.
view, I certainly don't have any opposition to that direction. At the end of the day, it's the board's prerogative, where and how, obsolete stuff gets disposed of as far as I'm concerned. So, if there was a group that the board felt was worthy of the district donation, I think that would be up to the board.
But them going on municipal bid, they're already paying pennies to the dollar on municipal bid for those, if those institutions were interested too, right? We'd just be
Yeah.
saving them the rest.
Yes, yes, we would be
Yeah.
able to take a charitable donation if it was a 503C, if we donated it, correct?
Getting rid of equipment is covered in the school code. So
Okay.
what we have to do is look at the school code. Generally speaking, you have to get bids and that's how you get rid of it. And if there are no bids, you can destroy it, get rid of it, just throw it out.
Okay.
We could be open to giving it away or donating it, I think, but I don't know if it's limited to only 501c3, tax exempt entities. Could we donate it to the Y? I don't know. We have to check with our solicitor, but you have to follow the school code.
That's fine. And I meant after, in the event that we
Right.
didn't, if it's sad.
Yeah.
Next two items are MOUs, just FYI, the security camera, that one's been back and forth to the solicitor, their solicitor, our solicitor, and back again. It's just a formality of taking action on the board level to put it in action. Columbia College, that's an MOU for severe weather, for acts of man-made or natural disaster, just a reciprocal agreement between the district and them. Kind of standard stuff, but they'll things you'll see on the regular board agenda for approval. And the last item we touched on was the February 6th adjustment to our meeting time instead of and in lieu of the following week. Following week, we won't need one.
Question on the lockers. So like 30 years into the future, we need lockers.
Question.
Yeah, I get you. We're digitizing, right? I guess I'm just, what I mean, I'm just asking.
That's a great question.
I love space, right? If you put dividers up, and you make it different things, you take the dividers down, lockers, like, I guess, is there like a modular system? That's all I want. Yeah, I mean, we're providing computers.
Chromebooks.
But I just, at some point, like, is that really just gonna be something like?
Great question.
Who uses that?
Well,
It's a valid point, yeah. Jay, on average, what would you say the typical student carries
Well, they have
book-wise?
to here because they can't carry the book bags. So it becomes an issue of security. If you, to your point, with the digitizing 30 years from now, probably not. I mean, quite honestly, 30 years from now, I don't know if it'll be the high school like we know it.
Sure.
It could be a drop-in. It could be more like a college campus. I think elementary, middle hours will stay the same. But 30 years from now, I don't know. But I would say for the next probably 10, until you fully transition to that digital, probably gonna need them. But at $500,000, it's a good question. It's a really good question.
I don't know. I mean,
We have to look at
I'm not
security.
for cutting things. I mean, this is very necessary. But I, like, let's say it is a 10-year, right? Well, if we remove them or scrap them because we want to put benches in that are more usable, I mean, now we got to finish all the walls. I don't know. It's just something. It was just, it's something that's removable.
I think as long as we have them, the kids go to school, they'll use them. I do.
So it is a concept we kind of kicked around. I guess my tripping point well, I agree with you, as we go to laptops and personal devices, the need of a place to put your books and notepads is diminishing, on a yearly basis. But my tripping point is, what do you do with the kids' personal belongings? What do you do with your winter coats? What do you do with your purses? What do you do with gym bag? There's just a lot of personal items I perceive the average high school student needs yet that I don't have a good answer for that. Yeah, I don't. Yep. No, I think it's a valid point. It's just,
In all your research, and not to harp on lockers, and I know everybody wants to go home, but I've never really understood the whole idea of the long and lean. Like, other than putting a small child inside of it, what is, like, why wouldn't it be more effective to have like
Yeah.
shorter, fatter,
Yeah.
and stacked? Like, so at the elementary schools, the children have a wider locker, it's longer, and then they have basically a glorified shelf that they can put things on. And 9 times out of 10, 3/4 of their stuff is stuffed on that shelf and nothing is hanging or organized in the very skinny upright part. So is there any manufacturer out there that would maybe make a deeper seated, but rectangular where you could do maybe 3 and you have the, 1, 2, 3 and someone's below in the middle and the high?
I'd propose in my mind, speaking to what your thought process is, a double tier locker would probably be as close to as practical as any. It's tall enough at a double tier that you can still hang your winter coat in it, a regular winter coat, not an overcoat or trench coat type thing. And then you do a double stack of those, so you get twice as much locker space per linear foot of hallway. I think there's probably still tough if you have a big book bag or a stack of books and a winter coat. It probably gets tight. The taller locker's probably nicer, but is it not doable? I don't know. A 3 stack would be there, but I think a double stack.
Kids
would
don't
be
hang their
potentially-
coats. They just.
Well, and I mean, I sell kids coats. Kids don't wear coats.
Mhm.
So, I mean, they have them, some of them do, but especially when you're talking about the older kids, many of whom are driving themselves. So they're not standing out at buses. They're getting into cars that are warm, getting out of cars that are warm and walking directly into buildings. At the elementary school level, where you are requiring children to wear coats at 30 degrees or I think it's like 30 to 40, they cannot go outside without a coat on. So they would need to have a coat. You don't have recess for high schoolers. So their necessity of their coat is to get into the building in the morning and get out of the building in the afternoon. But I see your point, like you don't want a mismatch thing, but I feel like most of them are going to be wearing lighter weight coats or sweatshirts, and that's going to be their coat because they don't need a snow coat to come to high school versus the littles who do because they're outside playing for an extended period of time. It's just a different stage of life for these kids. So I don't know. I think it's worth considering it since we are considering what we're going to do with these lockers to at least look at different options as well. I've only ever known the tall, skinny lockers. That's what I grew up with. But 9 times out of 10, everything was on the bottom floor of my locker and then the shelf. And then that middle space it was dead space. It was lost space. So just something to consider.
No, I guess if you double stack, then you gotta have maybe some accessibility issue with who has the top and who has the bottom. 2 people trying to get into the same area at the same time.
Yeah.
May not be a problem, but could be. Well, however, on the other side of this thing, as far as the number of lockers, let's say, we're looking at 400 per class. Is that a realistic number? I mean, where's our population going? Where did we come from 10 years ago?
Well, we're within 15 district-wide overall projection. I think you're building the building to grow into that, so you'd have to have the locker to grow into that.
True.
And there's always that potential. I mean, you see, there's a lot of building going on. Are we going to grow? Feasibility study says not really, but it doesn't account for those that move in, so it all depends. I think you have to, it's sort of like, if you build it, they will come. If you build it for 1,600, you got to put 1,600 lockers.
Yeah, true. Okay.
That's kind of what I looked at, Ray, was if we build it for 1,600, we have a cafeteria, we have locker rooms, we have, everything else supports 1,600. If our student population grows beyond 1,600 and we have to add 6 classrooms, well, there's another hallway where we could drop another 100 lockers or whatever it requires, so.
Yeah, okay.
So I just figured the locker additions would come as the classroom additions are required.
That's, yeah,
Oh, I just thought before we were wrapping up, I wanted to remind everyone that we're going to be holding our finance committee meeting next Monday, the 16th at 6:30. And then at that time, Mr. Mummert will pass out our binders and give his prezi. He said they're going to be extra thick. And then he'll do his prezi that evening, and we'll have the discussion around the millage. And then we'll also have another finance committee meeting the following Monday, the 23rd, 6:30 as well. That's all. That wasn't related to you.
It's all this month? It's this month, right?
This month, yeah. Both of those are this month? Yeah, okay.
And just for your reminder, our board retreat on January 28th. You're gonna get to see a lot.
For those of you who are not aware, some of you may already know that the reason Ann is not here, she needed to have emergency surgery on one of her legs a week and a half ago. So she is now at Cross Keys Village in rehab. So, and that's the reason she's not here tonight. She won't be here Wednesday either.
Aye.